Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Saturday. A little bit discombobulated today. Got I had plenty of time to get prepared, which is good. So everything should be working okay. But I don't know. A little bit discombobulated. I have had time over the week to actually do my walks, stretching and stuff like that. So that has been really nice. My wife bought this. I'll just show you. This little vibrating ball massager, and it didn't work for what she was trying to use it for, but I've got this and I've been using it, and it's really nice. My body is a wreck. This helps with like super tender in here and lots of places in my arm and my head and neck and stuff like that. I've been using it for that. It's been really good. Hopefully, it can help iron out some of my many issues. All right, so that's I got to meet with my friend Josie. Went to another job. We met on Friday and talked a bunch. That was nice. And that's really it. It's been just kind of warm in the house. We have a Google Nest, and it says 67 on there, but that's what 68. 68 is what we have it set for the furnace. We don't have central air. But I could swear it's been getting warmer in here. I know it's been warmer in my office. I was talking about this last week. It's been like 85 in here. It's like, why it's not even that warm outside? But it's actually 74 in the house downstairs. And which is it's comfortable, but a little bit warm for me. And up here, I turn on the AC finally, and I'm sitting at about 70. I have it set at 75. So we're sitting at 76 right now, so it's not so bad. That's about all. Yeah, it's about all that's going on. Oh, and hopefully I'll get my taxes done. I'll pick that up tomorrow. So happy it took me so long to get that done. Yeah, that's it. That's all I have going on. How about you guys? How was your week? I also started using sticky notes. Can't see it. It's yellow. Easter yellow. Try and put as an ADHD coping mechanism. Have these stickies put at the bottom of my monitor. Oh, and my second monitor died too. So I'm doing this streaming on one monitor, which is it's going to be okay, but it's not. Doing some of the work I do on one monitor isn't enough. So I have to get that taken care of as well. That's a $700 monitor, so that's not going to be pleasant. So we'll see. That's it. Seriously, that's all. Yawning just a little bit. Okay, so does anyone have any questions or comments or suggestions before we get started? Oh, and because my main monitor died, the other monitor I have isn't kind of centered. So the camera is actually off center too. So you're looking at me from a different angle than you normally would get, which annoys me, but hopefully it won't annoy you guys too much. All right. So I've been talking the last few weeks about the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and I've been a bit critical of it, and with good reason. But I also want to provide a little bit of balance to that, because the ICC was looking at U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan, if I remember correctly, and then the U.S. did some shitty things. And this is under Trump, as far as I'm aware. So we'll read about this, and then we'll get a little more balance to the ICC. Not that anything of value is going to happen from the International Criminal Court, at least as far as holding the U.S. responsible for its plethora of war crimes and the horrors it inflicts upon humanity, but at least you'll have a little more context as to why they don't do anything or can't do anything. All right. I changed my over here. See it? There's Doomer News with Free Xenon. That's over here on the right side. Change branding just a little bit. All right, this is from Human Rights Watch. This is December 14 of 2020. Into what, the first year of not quite the Trump hadn't quite taken office yet, right? How's this work? No, Biden. Yeah, Biden hadn't quite taken office yet. Right? Yeah, something like that. Okay. So, on September 2nd, 2020, the United States government imposed sanctions on the International Criminal Court prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, and another senior prosecution official, Bakiso Mochochoko. In addition, U.S. Secretary of State Michael Pompeo announced that the United States had restricted the issuance of visas for certain unnamed individuals involved in the ICC's efforts to investigate U.S. personnel. Sanctions on Bensouda and Mochochoko implemented a sweeping executive order on June 11, 2020 by President Donald Trump. This order declared a national emergency and authorized asset freezes and family entry bans against ICC officials who are identified as being involved in certain activities. Earlier, the Trump administration had repeatedly threatened action to thwart ICC investigations in Afghanistan and Palestine. In a precursor step in 2019, the Trump administration revoked the prosecutor's U.S. visa. We may have to take a look at that one. Okay. Following questions and answers discuss the Trump administration's unprecedented authorization of a sanctions program aimed at undermining the work of the ICC. So, this is done under a Republican. Right, not that Biden would be any different, because he wouldn't be, or Obama, or anyone, but they would engage in similar things, but they would do it in a less obvious or aggressive manner, as a nut job like Trump would. On September 2nd, under Executive Order 13928, the executive order on blocking property of certain persons associated with the International Criminal Court, U.S. officials added Fatou Bensouda, the ICC prosecutor, and Bakiso Mochochoko, the head of a division within the prosecutor's office, to the Specially Designated National Blocked Personnel List, the SDN list. This list is maintained by the U.S. Department of Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control. Now, yeah, anyone who's going to work against the ICC doing investigations into war crime, that's pretty much an admission of guilt, right? Their designation had two immediate effects. First, any property held by Bensouda and Mochochoko, or the property of any entity of which they own 50% or more in the United States, became blocked. Although any property they might have in the U.S. has not been seized, they would not be able to exercise any rights over it, including use or sale. In addition, U.S. persons or entities located anywhere in the world would not be able to transact with or provide services to either Bensouda or Mochochoko unless they received a license to do so from the U.S. government. U.S. persons are defined under executive order as any United States citizen, permanent resident alien, entity, organization under the laws of the United States, or any jurisdiction within the United States, including foreign branches, or any persons in the United States. Second, all property that might belong to Bensouda or Mochochoko that comes within a U.S. jurisdiction would be, quote, blocked. Because the vast majority of international trade is conducted via U.S. dollar, this has potentially broad implications. U.S. dollar denominated transactions, even if they are between two non-U.S. parties, usually require a bank under U.S. jurisdiction to handle the transaction. Thus, any transaction that passes through them, even momentarily, would also be blocked. The importance of the US dollar and the fear of losing access to risk-averse US banks means that most major financial institutions around the globe regularly refuse to conduct transactions with or for individuals on the SDN list. This is so even in transactions in which there is no connection to dollars, US persons, or US jurisdiction. This broadens the reach of the sanctions far beyond blocking assets like bank accounts or property physically located in the United States, and can affect the ability of designated people to conduct any economic transaction at all on a global basis. In addition, the fear of potentially running afoul of this executive order's vague and undefined prohibition on the provision of material assistance or support to sanctioned people creates additional risk. In addition, Bensouda and Motochoko, who were sanctioned as individuals and their immediate family members, are presumed to be subject to U.S. visa restrictions under the terms of the executive order. Are you answering questions here? Oh yeah, so these are questions. All right, so the next one is, should others be designated for sanctions? The executive order does not name persons, that is, individuals or entities, but the U.S. government has discretion on listing additional persons pursuant to the order. The threshold needed to sanction additional individuals or organizations is fairly low. The designating authority need only have a reasonable basis to believe that the target falls under one of the designation prongs. Furthermore, there is no guidance regarding how concrete, direct, or even effective an activity must be in order to be deemed an effort to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute. The executive order specifies that only foreign persons can be listed. Therefore, a U.S. citizen or U.S. incorporated company could not be added to the SDN list. However, the impact of the sanctions program on dual U.S. citizens, whether they would qualify as foreign persons, is unclear. The foreign incorporated subsidiaries and affiliates of U.S.-based companies and organizations would qualify as foreign persons. To be designated for sanctions, a foreign individual or organization must also fall under one of the following designation prongs of the executive order. All right, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So four prongs, A through D. A, have directly engaged in any effort by the ICC to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute any U.S. personnel without the consent of the U.S. Okay, so this pretty much undermines the entire point of the ICC, right? B, have directly engaged in any effort by the ICC to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute any personnel of a country that is an ally of the U.S. without the consent of that country's government. Okay, so they're giving a blanket okay on committing war crimes, right? And that they cannot be held accountable without the country saying so. Of course, the country won't say so. Have materially assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, or technological support for, or goods or services to, or in support of, any activities described in A or B, in A or B, or any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order, that is presently only Bensouda or Motochoko. Or D, be owned or controlled by, or to have acted or purported to act for, or on behalf of, directly or indirectly, any person whose property and interests in property are blocked under this order. Yeah, so this whole thing really just undermines the entire point of the ICC, right? It's there to investigate war crimes, crimes against humanity, that sort of thing, and then the United States as the largest global terrorist organization saying, no, you can't do that. Just no. Not without our say-so. Something criminals would say, right? Who has the authority to designate sanction targets? Order authorizes the U.S. Secretary of State to designate sanction targets in consultation with the U.S. Treasury Secretary and the U.S. Attorney General. Practice, the Department of Treasury, and particularly OFAC, I don't know what that's office, I'm not sure what that stands for, plays a critical role in determining who is designated as it maintains the SDN list, defends listings, and has the most experience developing materials to determine whether an individual or entity should be designated for sanctions. OFAC also plays a leading role in enforcing the prohibitions that flow from designated. What is the reach of the sanctions and how are sanctions enforced? The effect of these sanctions is by no means limited to those designated under the order. They have broader reach. Significant civil and criminal penalties may be enforced against people, entities anywhere in the world that violate, attempt to violate, conspire to violate, or cause a violation of the executive order by interacting with a designated person in a way that violates the prohibitions contained in the order sections 1A, 3, 5. These prohibitions are broad and include transferring, paying, exporting, withdrawing, or otherwise dealing with the property and interest in property of a designated person located in the U.S. or in the possession or control of any U.S. person. Yeah, you can't help them at all. Making any contribution or provision of funds, goods, or services by, to, or for the benefit of any designated persons. You can't help them in any way. Receiving any contribution or provision of funds, goods, or services from any designated person that can't pay you. Transfer goods to you. Any transaction that evades or avoids has the purpose of evading or avoiding, causes a violation of, or attempts to violate any of the prohibitions contained in the executive order. Can't work to bypass it, right? Any conspiracy formed to violate any of the prohibitions set forth in the executive order. Yikes. The severity of penalties is intended to deter others from interacting with designated people. Interacting with a designated person carries a civil penalty of up to $307,922, or twice the value of the transaction that violated the order. Prohibited interactions with a designated person also subject an individual or entity to a criminal fine of up to $1 million. And for individuals, up to 20 years in prison. This is all the stuff that's levied against anyone who would assist members of the ICC who would want to investigate the United States for war crimes, right? Or crimes against humanity or whatever else they do. Now, this is under Trump when this happened. While U.S. persons cannot be designated under the executive order, they can be subject to these penalties for violating the order, becoming potential targets for enforcement. Therefore, U.S. individuals and institutions, whether in the U.S. or outside the U.S., are prohibited from any transaction with Bensouda or Motochoko and must freeze any property belonging to either. The same restrictions apply to any foreign person or entity located in the U.S. How could these sanctions affect the work of the ICC? Now, again, this is from the Human Rights Watch. This is their post on this from December 2020, talking about the order. While the International Criminal Court itself has not been sanctioned, the executive order and the sanctions on Bensouda and Motochoko could have serious consequences for the work of the ICC. It's a chilling effect, right? And saying, okay, you investigate us and we're going to destroy your life. The effects of these sanctions are by no means limited to the individuals targeted, but may have wide-reaching consequences. Particularly, current service providers to the ICC, from banks to vending machine companies, may reassess whether continuing to work with the institution is prudent given the risk of inadvertently violating U.S. sanctions. Yeah. That would be bad. Not that... Yeah, actually, I don't know a whole lot about the history of what they're doing currently, but having this organization is a good thing, I think, whether or not it is able to do what it really needs to do because of the interference of the U.S. Although Bensouda and Motochoko have been sanctioned to minimize risk, financial institutions often go out of their way to comply with U.S. regulations and may preemptively refuse to deal with transactions involving the ICC, even if Bensouda and Motochoko are not involved. In addition, the executive order is aimed at and has created apprehension and uncertainty for non-governmental organizations, consultants, and lawyers who work with the ICC in investigative and adjudicative capacities. Under what authority is the U.S. President able to impose sanctions? The executive order was issued under authority granted to the President by the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEA. The U.S. Congress enacted the law in 1977 to enable the president to declare national emergencies with limited congressional oversight. The law allows the president to declare an emergency to deal with an unusual and extraordinary threat, which has its source in whole or substantial part outside the United States, to the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States. Pretty broad. To meet this requirement, Executive Order 13928 states that any attempt by the ICC to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute any United States personnel without the consent of the United States or of any personnel of countries that are United States allies and who are not parties to the Rome Statute or have not otherwise consented to ICC jurisdiction constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. It's only a threat is if you are doing war crimes and crimes against humanity, right? Once a national emergency has been declared, the president has broad powers to regulate economic transactions in relation to the emergency. Has the U.S. used its sanctions authority in this way before? The U.S. has frequently imposed sanctions against a range of regimes and actors involved in human rights violations. Corruptions or other actions the U.S. wants to condemn, like not bowing down to our corporate interests to rape your country and destroy it for fun and corporate profit, right? Yeah. Some have targeted rights abusers and officials responsible for significant harm to their populations, even if not uniformly. For example, in October 2020, the U.S. sanctioned officials in Belarus for the role in fraud in the August 2020 presidential elections and subsequent crackdown on protesters. Okay, that's very, very valid use of it. In 2018, the U.S. sanctioned 17 Saudi government agents in connection with their alleged involvement in the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Okay, that's good, including a former top advisor to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The U.S. also sanctioned companies and individuals involved with providing financial support to the Islamic State, ISIS. Though sanctions are at times counterproductive and politically motivated, they can be an important and effective tool to punish human rights abusers, particularly in situations where there has been little or no accountability. Sanctions are not a substitute for prosecutions, but they can send a powerful message to abusers that their abuse will not be tolerated and may have a material impact on the abusers, prompting them to change their conduct. Even if targets do not hold U.S. assets, the U.S. dollar's position as the world's preeminent reserve currency and medium of exchange means that U.S. sanctions can have crippling effect on designated targets. Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why people leaving the dollar, which is happening a lot right now, they're shifting to Chinese yuan or other sorts of currencies to get off the U.S. dollar so that they can't be held hostage by the U.S.'s terrorism. The U.S. government has never previously deployed sanctions against officials at an international organization or court. Here, the U.S. has decided to utilize the coercive powers of sanctions against the ICC, court of last resort mandated to fight impunity for serious international crimes under the statute, an international treaty of which most core allies are members. Are these sanctions being challenged before U.S. courts? What about challenges to similar sanctions? On October 1st, 2020, the Open Society Justice Initiative, a public interest law center, together with 4 law professors, filed a complaint before U.S. federal court alleging that the executive order and the subsequent designations of Bensouda and Motochoko violated the plaintiff's rights under the Constitution. Under the U.S. Constitution. Plaintiffs allege, among other issues, that their First Amendment right to freedom of speech has been violated, as the threat of civil or criminal penalties associated with the enforcement or designation for sanctions under the order. In their submission, they contend that this has caused them to discontinue, abandon, or reconsider a range of activities in support of the ICC work. The case remains pending. In addition, in 1988, the IEEPA was amended, known as the Berman Amendment, to protect the exchange of information and informational materials in various formats, including publications, photographs, tapes, and more. This provision generally exempts the exchange of such information from the president's regulatory authority. The plaintiffs in the lawsuit also allege that the order purports to prohibit the exchange of protected information and therefore is not permitted under IEA. Again. So it says to protect the exchange of information. Okay, which is good. Yeah, okay, so well, that's good. That allows journalists to do their thing still. First Amendment challenges to executive orders under IEEPA have had some success in recent months. Most recently, federal judges have granted preliminary injunctions preventing the implementation of 2 executive orders imposing restrictions on the Chinese mobile applications TikTok and WeChat, on the basis that the president may have overstepped his authority under the Berman Amendment's protections, thus violating user First Amendment rights. Okay. However, in general, U.S. courts have demonstrated a high degree of deference to the U.S. government on national security matters. Furthermore, given the relatively low burden of proof on the government for designation and enforcement, challenges have rarely been successful. The U.S. Congress retains the ability to terminate national emergencies by resolution. However, without presidential support, this would require the resolution to pass with a veto-proof majority. That is, a 2/3 majority by both the House of Representatives and the Senate. The U.S. Congress has never terminated a state of emergency declared under IEA. The European Union has expressed concern about the extraterritorial reach of some U.S. sanctions programs and has taken countermeasures when it comes to certain other sanction programs. What countermeasures could the EU take? Okay, well, this is interesting. Because the order does protect EU states even more. I find this question curious, but let's see what they have to say. The EU has enacted a blocking statute to counter the extraterritorial reach of unilateral sanctions imposed by other countries that it considers to be unlawful. The blocking statute broadly restricts EU-based individuals and entities from complying with sanctions that the EU considers abusive in their extraterritorial reach and provides for the recovery in court of damages caused by the extraterritorial application of the specified foreign sanctions. Okay? Blocking statute's primary purpose is to protect EU individuals and entities engaging in international trade in a manner compliant with EU law, but in breach of what it considers to be unlawful or abusive sanctions imposed by countries outside the EU. At a political level, it also reflects the EU's disapproval of sanctions with extraterritorial reach imposed by other countries that the EU considers to be abusive or unreasonable. Okay, that is something that they should do to the US on many levels. The EU's blocking statute has only prohibited individuals and entities in the EU from complying with the US sanctions on Iran, Cuba, and Libya. Okay, well, that's good. Historically, the blocking statute has not been vigorously enforced, though it appears that that may be changing with respect to both Iran and Cuba. Given the EU's strong support for the ICC, the EU should consider adding the executive order to the list of unilateral sanctions that receive the blocking statute protection. Yeah, I agree 100%. Definitely. How have ICC member countries responded to the US's sanctions? In response to the executive order in June, 67 ICC member countries, including key U.S. allies, issued a joint cross-regional statement expressing unwavering support for the court as an independent and impartial judicial institution. Okay, that's good. That's exactly what they should have done. This was accompanied by statements from the European Union, the president of the ICC's Assembly of State Parties, national governments, and non-governmental organizations in the U.S. and globally. Following the September designations of the 2 ICC officials, the EU, the ASP president, some national governments, and non-governmental groups again spoke out. In November, 71 ICC member countries jointly reaffirmed their support for the ICC as court of last resort in a statement delivered before the UN General Assembly, implicitly rejecting U.S. actions aimed at undermining the court by noting that sanctions are a tool to be used against those responsible for the most serious crimes, not against those seeking justice. Any attempt to undermine the independence of the court should not be tolerated. Yep, agreed. Yep, so there you go. This is from, again, December 14th. This is under the Trump administration. Of course, Trump is a little child. So there you go. I wonder if... Okay, we already read through these. Okay. I wonder if Biden undid that. I think we have 2 more articles on this. Okay, this is from The Intercept. This is in October of 2021. About a year later, how the U.S. derailed an effort to prosecute its crimes in Afghanistan. The International Criminal Court's decision to deprioritize a probe into crimes by the U.S. and its allies came after years of U.S. obstruction. Last week, the new chief prosecutor of the ICC, International Criminal Court, the only international body with the authority to prosecute individuals over genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, sought to reopen a previously suspended investigation in Afghanistan, but with a caveat. The probe would not include conduct by the United States and its allies, including the U.S.-backed former Afghan government, all of which have committed crimes that fall squarely within the court's jurisdiction. Yeah, so until the ICC has the balls to do this regardless, the ICC is going to be very limited to their usefulness candidate. They're basically just a tool to oppress. They're going to investigate war crimes, which is good, but it's not going to be holding people who really need to be held accountable, like the United States. Court's prosecutor, Karim Khan, who has been on the job for just over 3 months, wrote in a statement that his office would focus exclusively on crimes committed by the Taliban and by Islamic State Khorasan Province, or ISK, the Islamic State group's affiliate in Afghanistan. Now, see, I don't have a problem with them concentrating on this, like, we'll do this part of the investigation is going to do this, and then do another investigation on the U.S., another set of investigations on the EU. That would be fine, but we know that's not going to happen. A preliminary investigation of crimes committed in Afghanistan since the country joined the court in 2003 had been underway for more than a decade, where a full investigation was authorized and then suspended in favor of an Afghanistan-led process. That investigation included crimes committed by all parties to the conflict, marking the first time the ICC probed crimes committed by U.S. forces, which in Afghanistan included extrajudicial killings, drone strikes that killed an untold number of civilians, and torture. Wasn't one of the main reasons why Julian Assange is in exile and in prison right now because of a drone strike on reporters from Afghanistan? Isn't that what that video was originally from? I think it is, but I don't remember. Now, with the panel ICC judges authorize the prosecutor's request, the resumed investigation would deprioritize other aspects of the investigation, Khan said, an implicit reference to the U.S. and its allies, and the executive order that we just read about. The announcement dealt a blow to victims, human rights advocates, and those who had placed in the ICC their last hope to see the crimes committed by the U.S. by U.S. personnel and officials prosecuted in a court of law. Yep. Well, many Afghans welcomed the reopening of a case that they hope will preserve the international community's scrutiny of the newly installed Taliban government. They warned that the decision would threaten the credibility of a court that has long faced questions about its ability to take on the world's most powerful countries. Yep, agreed. This just proves one more time that to Afghanistan, that international mechanisms do not value their life when foreigners are involved, and international forces are involved. Farzad Akbar, who chaired Afghanistan's Independent Human Rights Commission until the Taliban took control of the country in August, told The Intercept. This decision reinforces the perception that these institutions set up in the West and by the West are just instruments for the West's political agenda. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And it's going to be very, very difficult to get an independent court, paid for and resourced without the involvement of the West. If the West doesn't pay for it and basically get to dictate it, then it's pretty much not going to really have any sort of power. But unfortunately, because the West would support it, they definitely don't want those their eyes looking at them, right? Much like they're saying here, West is setting it up and paying for it, then the West wants it looking outwards, not inward. The ICC has historically operated with limited resources, with an annual budget of roughly $172 million paid for by its 123 members. In a world starved for justice and accountability, the ICC's resource problems has at times become a political one, raising questions about how the court prioritizes which cases to tackle. In recent years, the ICC has opened inquiries into potential Russian crimes in Georgia and Ukraine and Israeli crimes in Palestine, and it has opened and then shuttered preliminary inquiries into acts committed by British troops in Iraq. All have faced significant opposition. The United States, which is not an ICC member. Oh, okay. When did we leave that? I assumed we were, and then we weren't. George Bush. No. Okay, so I guess we never had joined. I assumed we would have. Okay, so we may not have ever joined. Okay, the United States, which is not an ICC member, has also long taken a hostile stance towards the court, opposing investigations into its allies, including Israel, because genocidal terrorist organizations, right? And fiercely contesting the court's jurisdiction over U.S. nationals. U.S. officials have put extensive pressure on the court, the Afghan government, and U.S. allies in any effort to derail any investigation of American crimes. Clearly a political decision. There's really no other way it can be interpreted. It gave the US, the UK, and their allies a get out of jail free card. Jennifer Gibson, an attorney focused on extrajudicial executions at the human rights group Reprieve, wrote in a statement to The Intercept in response to Khan's announcement. It's almost as if the two countries wrote the script for him. It mentions the attack on Kabul airport in the waning days of withdrawal, but ignores US drone strikes that killed a family of 10, including 7 children, soon afterward. The International Criminal Court, which is based in the Netherlands. Somehow, when I picture this, I always picture it somewhere near, like in Greenland or something like that. Like, my brain, I kind of pictured it in its own little island, its own little space, or something like that. It just, when I hear it's based in the Netherlands, I'm gobsmacked. It's like I have no idea that it's there. So that's it's just mind-boggling for me. The International Criminal Court, which is based in the Netherlands. Now, also interesting is it makes perfect sense that one of the Nordic countries is the one who sponsors this and is the home to it, and may have even thought of it. I don't know what the history is of the ICC, but I imagine the Nordic countries had a lot to do with it. Began operating in 2002. Oh, that's not very long ago. Just as the US-led war on terror was ramping up. Well, who did the World War II prosecution? I assumed it's been up since World War II. Okay. The Nuremberg trials, yes, okay. Oh, okay. So it wasn't the ICC because it did this until recently. Okay. International Military Tribunal. I'll go and throw this in here if you want to look at it. Okay. Interesting. Afghanistan ratified the Rome Statute, the ICC's founding treaty, in 2003, shortly after the US defeated the Taliban and installed a transitional government. By that point, the country had been at war for decades, and many foreign and domestic parties had committed atrocities that would qualify as war crimes and crimes against humanity. The 10-year war with Soviet Russia had killed over 1 million Afghans and displaced millions more. A subsequent period of civil conflict between Afghan factions had killed hundreds of thousands more. Then in 1996 came the first Taliban government, which ruled over Afghanistan until the US invasion in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. In 2002, 1 month after the court began operating, the US enacted the American Service Members Protection Act, which sought to protect US personnel from international prosecutions. US officials also pursued dozens of bilateral agreements to pressure other countries not to collaborate with the court. So, as soon as it was the ICC was a thing, the United States was already undermining it. Of course it did. From the very beginning, they were trying to shield themselves from responsibility. Raquel Vasquez Lorente, the International Federation for Human Rights' permanent representative to the ICC, told The Intercept they were very scared that the court would bring their people to The Hague. Of course they are. In 2006, the ICC prosecutor Batu Bensouda opened a preliminary probe in Afghanistan, though the court would only have jurisdiction over crimes that had taken place since Afghanistan had ratified this Rome Statute. At the time, the court was facing pressure to investigate abuses beyond Africa, where all of the ICC's early cases had taken place. Bensouda, a Gambian national, and Pakiso Mochochoko, another senior ICC official who was from Lesotho. That's in Europe. Right? No, South Africa. That's the other thing I was thinking. Africa or... Okay, so Lesotho. So both of them are from Africa. Gambia and Lesotho. Were eager to change the narrative that the court was not willing to take on global superpowers and made clear that they would look at conduct by all parties to the Afghan conflict, foreign powers included. Okay, so this is cool. This is in a sense a way to Africans to try and hold the global north responsible for the horrors inflicted upon the world, right? That's ballsy and that's cool. Very cool. They have my support. Under ICC rules, the court can open an investigation if a member country requests it, if the United Nations Security Council refers a case, or if it believes that one of the crimes that fall under its jurisdiction were committed within the territory of a member state or by nationals of a member state operating in another country. Under that third category, that the court claimed authority over the conduct of U.S. nationals in Afghanistan, as well as in Romania, Lithuania, and Poland, where CIA operated black sites. Yeah. Yikes. Prosecutors had hoped to find a receptive partner in the administration of President Barack Obama, particularly as the American public had widely condemned the war on terror tactics of his predecessor, but U.S. officials unequivocally warned the court that opposition to the investigation of American crimes was bipartisan. Of course, the criminals don't want to be investigated because both Republicans and Democrats are both war criminals. Like every single president since the beginning and every single Congress since the beginning should all be investigated and imprisoned for war crimes. With political opposition from the strongest party to the conflict, the preliminary inquiry in Afghanistan dragged along for a decade. 2017, with President Donald Trump newly in office, Bensouda finally moved to formally request the court's permission to launch an official investigation. In 2019, the ICC's pretrial chamber, the body tasked with authorizing a formal investigation, denied such an authorization. An unprecedented political decision, an unprecedented decision that cited, among other things, the political climate surrounding the probe. Oh, this is a 32-page. Okay. We all read between the lines. Catherine Gallagher, a senior staff attorney at the Center for Constitutional Rights who represents victims of U.S. torture, told The Intercept, noting that the statement clearly referenced the political pressure that the Trump administration had put on the court. And that's what we read about earlier, the putting sanctions on both Bensouda and the other guy, the Lesotho dude. Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, had been fiercely opposed to the ICC since his days in the Bush administration, and he encouraged Trump to threaten ICC officials with sanctions and prosecutions as well as to revoke Bensouda's entry visa to the U.S. The prosecutor's team denounced the scare tactics and pressed forward, projecting outwardly at least a continuing willingness to take on the U.S. The court's investigation of U.S. acts had barely started, however, and political pressure on the ICC was threatening to thwart other aspects of the probe as well. ICC prosecutors and representatives of victims suddenly appealed the denial from pretrial chambers, and the ICC's appeals chamber authorized a formal investigation in Afghanistan on March 5th, 2020. In response, okay, so now is when the executive order comes in. In response, the Trump administration issued an executive order, which we read about earlier, condemning the ICC and imposing sanctions on Bensouda and Mochochoko, the first time the U.S. had ever taken such actions against officials of an international body. The administration also stepped up its pressure on the Afghan government, which was eager to maintain U.S. support, and made a last-minute request to testify before the ICC in opposition to the appeal. When that effort failed, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo flew to Kabul. A day after his visit, the Afghan government petitioned to defer the ICC investigation in Afghanistan in order to allow a national investigation to take place instead. Of course, the police are going to investigate themselves and find nothing was wrong, right? As a court of last resort, the ICC is required to give precedence to national process. But it's unclear whether the Afghan government was actively pursuing one. The deferral also meant a pause of ICC investigations into torture at CIA black sites across Eastern Europe, even though those were crimes that the Afghan government was not in position to investigate. Akbar, the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission chair, told The Intercept that she had tried to talk Afghan government officials out of effectively killing the ICC probe. Private conversations, I would say, to Afghan government officials, why are you guys going with the US's ways, especially after they have signed an agreement with the Taliban? She said, referring to a peace agreement between the US and the Taliban signed in Qatar in early 2020. Withdraw your deferral, do something for your nation. Yeah, agreed. Akbar kept advocating for Afghan officials to allow an ICC investigation until the last months before the Taliban takeover, including when a government delegation met with court officials in The Hague last May, around the same time as an ISK attack on Kabul school killed 90 people, most of them teenage girls. Christ. this culture of impunity, it all feeds into each other. This lack of justice creates conditions and emboldens people to do these things. Akbar said, she told her Afghan government colleagues. I said, for God's sake, look at what's happening. Let them investigate, please. But it was clear that they were under a lot of U.S. pressure and that was a key factor in making that decision. The deferral essentially put a stop to the ICC investigation in Afghanistan before it could start. It also relieved ICC prosecutors of their pledge to push through with an investigation that faced powerful opposition without having to publicly capitulate to the U.S. When the administration of President Joe Biden lifted sanctions on ICC officials earlier this year, okay, good. So I was wondering if Biden had lifted it, so he had. That's good. It did so with the tacit understanding that the court's probe on U.S. crimes wouldn't presume, of course. But I imagine if they do, we're going to have something similar crop up, right? White House did not respond to a request for comment. Man grieves for his family during a mass funeral for the 10 civilians that were killed in a U.S. drone airstrike in Kabul. This is August 30, 2021. 2021, yep. We cannot delay this forever. The ICC prosecutor statement Khan cited the gravity, scale, and continuing nature of alleged crimes by the Taliban and the Islamic State, as well as his office's limited resources, as a reason to scale back the probe. While many human rights advocates condemned the decision, others said it was a pragmatic one that allowed the ICC to move forward with at least some parts of the investigation that U.S. pressure had already successfully derailed. The ICC prosecutor's office did not respond to a series of questions by The Intercept. On Friday, a group of Afghan victims filed a statement with the ICC in support for the reopening of the investigation. The international community failed the Afghan people in letting the Taliban take over Afghanistan and by allowing the impunity to reign for the past 15 years due to inactivity and unjustified delays by this court in administering justice, they wrote. There is no further basis to wait, and there is no reason to do so. Ghulam Saki, a researcher with Afghanistan Human Rights and Democracy Organization, an Afghan-based human rights group, told The Intercept that it would have been ideal for the ICC to investigate crimes committed by all conflict parties in Afghanistan, including the Afghan government as well as the international military troops, which obviously includes the U.S. He denounced superpowers as pressure on the court as a tragic aspect of international justice. So, yeah, unless the ICC can be financially independent, there's no way it will ever have the ability to truly investigate people who are paying for them. I mean, especially if the United States is one of those. The United States isn't paying for them, but they can, as we have read, inflict serious economic and political pressure on them. But the narrower investigation is also important, he said, considering the Taliban's recent return to power and the grisly attacks that ISK has committed against civilians in recent years, including massacres at a hospital maternity ward and a suicide bombing that killed nearly 200 people outside the Kabul airport in August. We cannot delay this forever because, unfortunately, the U.S. cannot be encouraged to cooperate, said Saki, whose group has facilitated the representation of victims before the ICC. There was a fear that the U.S. could have derailed this entire Afghanistan investigation, but I think would have been to the detriment of the victims of conflict in Afghanistan. It's far better if certain crimes are investigated than if no crimes are investigated at all. Okay, that is definitely fair. I can definitely agree to that. But this just makes sure that the U.S. and the global North can run with impunity and terrorize and destroy everyone for fun and corporate profit. Of course. Critics of the decision argued that the deprioritizing U.S. and other foreign powers' crimes undermines the court's principle of impartiality and reveals a lack of understanding of the conditions that precipitated the collapse of the Afghan government in the first place. When you know the conflict, those abuses were so much part of where we are today. They were the kinds of things that fueled a lot of the grievances that alienated people from the government. Tricia Grossman, Human Rights Watch's Associate Director for Asia, told The Intercept, "It's very disappointing that the prosecutor would make a statement basically suggesting that only one side of the conflict is worthy of investigation." Yep. Liz Evenson, an Associate Director of Human Rights Watch's International Justice Program, focuses on the ICC, noted that Khan's decision, one of his first official actions, reignites long-standing questions about how the court chooses to allocate its limited resources. The work that the ICC does has to be meaningful, she said. For it to be meaningful, it needs to resonate and relate to the victims' experiences. It needs to be perceived as independent, and it needs to be perceived as impartial. Agreed. Satellite imagery of the Salt Pit CIA prison where detainees were tortured, seen outside Kabul. This is from September 1st, 2014. U.S. impunity. Or it was shelved, the ICC investigation into U.S. crimes in Afghanistan was expected to focus primarily on the torture program, which is much better documented than drone strikes and other crimes. Those would also fall under the ICC jurisdiction, but it's unclear how closely the court was investigating them. Critics of the decision to scale back the probe have noted that by essentially enabling impunity for U.S. crimes, the court risks sending the message to dictators, autocrats, and even other powerful democracies that they may get away with them too. Khan, a British lawyer, previously led a United Nations investigative team focused on crimes committed by the Islamic State in Iraq. In his announcement, he emphasized the UN has repeatedly warned that terrorist activities of the Islamic State constitute a global threat to international peace and security. Well, that same thing could be said for the United States. Gallagher, the CCR attorney, was alarmed by that reference. Unlike war crimes and crimes against humanity, there is no clear definition of terrorism in international criminal law, and terrorism is not cited in the Rome Statute. Instead, she said, the reference reflected a war on terror mentality. It is concerning to see the language of terrorism, which is a term that operates in the political sphere, come into a criminal court, she said, particularly when the shift was announced in conjunction with impunity for U.S. crimes. International law has been turned into a sword rather than a shield to protect civilians. We see it when we look at autocrats and dictators around the world who label their political enemies as terrorists, even as the ICC's effort to reopen part of its Afghanistan investigation could lead to justice for some victims of the Taliban and ISK. It is leaving countless others behind. It is also denying Americans an opportunity to see their own government held accountable for the crimes it committed in their name. Yeah, 100% agreed. I would love to see all those fuckers in jail. While a series of public inquiries have shed light on many of the abuses the U.S. has carried out during its two-decade war on terror, there have been no significant criminal or civil cases against those responsible. Right, and there's basically no way to do that outside the ICC because no one has the money to sue the U.S. government or the jurisdiction. This is as much about the U.S. as it is about Afghanistan, said Akbar, the IHRC chair, International Human Rights Council chair, who has called on the U.S. to take responsibility for its actions and initiate a process of reparations. It's about Afghan victims, but it's also about the U.S. military and its deep and systemic problems. Americans who care about the U.S. should care about this. Agreed, 100%. All right, this is the last one on this topic. Fair and balanced. Center for Constitutional Rights. I don't know anything about this. Yes, we'll see. This is from September 27th, 2021. Prosecutor seeks to move forward with investigation against only Taliban Islamic State Khorasan province. Prosecutor Karim A.A. Khan of the International Criminal Court this morning released a statement indicating that the court will end its investigation into torture, other crimes committed by U.S. personnel arising out of the armed conflict in Afghanistan, or with a nexus thereto, so-called black sites in other ICC member countries. In announcing that he was seeking to the Afghanistan investigation, Khan said he'll focus on the alleged crimes of the Taliban and the Islamic State Khorasan province, and he deprioritized other aspects, obliquely referring to U.S. crimes and those by Afghan national forces. Okay, we won't read this. Basically read all this in the other free links. All right, now we're going to move on to some climate change stuff. Nope, that's not the one. No, we're doing oh, this is the plastic plant that's on fire. Plastic plant on fire. All right, so this is from the 14th. This is from yesterday. What's this one from? Sweet. All right. This is from CNN from yesterday. Only hotspots and flare-ups are left of the Indiana plastics recycling plant fire. Residents' health worries linger as EPA detects asbestos and organic pollutants. Of course, plastic is horrific. And look at this. Look at this. Look at the size of this. Giant ass black plume coming off there. As a 2-day inferno fizzles out at a plastics recycling plant, a state judge deemed a public health hazard. Up to 2,000 residents of an eastern Indiana city are still waiting to learn whether it's safe to go home. Not going to be for a very long time. Residents on Friday remained under an evacuation order, and officials will meet Saturday to see the numbers from air and water samples. Results will determine how long order stays in place. Richmond Mayor Dave Snow said Friday. Though the fire is under control, the site is very dangerous, Snow said. I need people to stay away from this location. Chemicals, hydrogen cyanide, benzene, chlorine, carbon monoxide, and volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, were detected at the center of the fire zone, with none detected outside the evacuation zone of the community. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency said Friday, noting firefighters should take precautions. Yeah, they should be full filtering, oxygen, and stuff like that. Potentially harmful VOCs were found in 6 air samples that will be submitted for laboratory analysis, and results will be reported early this week. The agency said without detailing where the samples were taken. Particulate matter, fine particles, and smoke also was found inside and outside the half-mile evacuation zone, it said. One of 2 air samples taken a little more than a mile from the fire site detected chrysotile asbestos in debris, an EPA official said Thursday. Also called white asbestos, it can cause cancer and is used in products from cement to plastics to textiles. Anyone who may have fire debris in their yard should not mow their lawns until the officials can advise more on how to clean it up. EPA official Jason Sewell said EPA has been monitoring the air for toxic chemicals from incinerated plastics at 18 spots around the fire site. Yeah, so this is just going to be, it's going to be in the air, it's going to be in the ground, and it's going to be in the water. This whole area is going to be not a place to live. Brown said Thursday night the fire was under control and added on Friday that hotspots could continue to flare up, so crews will remain at the site throughout the weekend. Sewell said 2 new contaminants were detected at a hotspot overnight, but when it was extinguished, there was no further detection. Billowing black smoke that clouded Richmond this week stirred memories of this year's toxic train wreck in East Palestine, Ohio. High levels of some chemicals from the disaster could pose long-term risk. Yes, they do. They may as well just abandon that city for the most part, because that is going to be a cancer zone for at least a decade, if not more. For the third consecutive day since the fire ignited, Richmond Public Schools are closed Friday. Really unbelievable, resident Corey McConnell, whose family left their home in the evacuation zone, told them. Makes me worry about the health of my family, not just today, but in the future as well. Who knows how long this could be in the air for? Yeah, and then as a part of this, the property values are going to drop. So it's going to be almost impossible for these people to sell their house and leave because no one's going to want to buy it. Maybe some long-term investors may look at it, right? Families will take, 50% or more loss on the value of their property and actually have to find a way to pay for their mortgage, pay for the rest of the mortgage that someone, this business is buying it for. And then these investors will just hold on to the property for a decade or two. Just wait until it gets better or that EPA says it's clear, even though it's not, and then reopen it, turn it into sell it commercially, and people will still die even though EPA says it's okay. Make lots of money off it that way if they have the money to burn. Initial investment. Well, it's not yet clear what sparked the fire. Local leaders have shared concerns since at least 2019 that the facility was riddled with fire hazards and building code violations. Records show. We knew it was a matter of time. It was a matter of when this was going to happen, the fire chief said. Why the fuck didn't they do something? Health concerns swell even after fire dies. Connell already could smell fumes when his family left Tuesday night as they saw exhausted firefighters battling the blaze. Resident Wendy Snyder evacuated to Red Cross emergency shelter, but briefly returned home to grab a few belongings, she told CNN affiliate WHIO. That's when she noticed the stench of burning plastic. There's a stink in the air when you go outside on our porch, Snyder said. In fact, it burned my throat because we weren't wearing masks. We weren't wearing a mask. Primary health concern to residents is particulate matter, fine particles found in smoke that could cause respiratory problems if inhaled, said Christine Stinson, executive director of the Wayne County Health Department. N95 masks, the kind recommended to thwart COVID-19, could protect against the particles, but people should leave an area if they see or smell smoke or experience symptoms. City officials blame plant owner for the fire. Richmond officials were aware that what was operating here was a fire hazard. Snow, the mayor, said Wednesday, accusing the plant's owner of ignoring a city order to clean up the property. CNN has reached out to Seth Smith, the owner of the Cornerstone Trading Group, LLC. The attorney who previously represented Smith in a related lawsuit declined to comment. Smith was contacted by an investigator Tuesday night, Snow. Blaze began in a semi-trailer loaded with plastics, then spread to surrounding piles of recyclables before eventually reaching the building, which was completely full from floor to ceiling and from wall to wall. Brown, the fire chief, said when firefighters arrived, he said they had difficulty reaching the buildings because access roads were blocked by piles of plastic. Everything that's ensued here, the fire, the damages, the risk to our first responders have taken. The risk that our first responders have taken and the risk these citizens are under are the responsibility of that negligent business owner. So, yeah, and then all they're going to do is declare bankruptcy and not pay anything. Firefighters trying not to destroy potential evidence that might help determine the cause, Brown said. That conclusion probably won't be reached until investigators can safely enter the plant, the state fire marshal's office has said. Any legal liability against the plant owner will be handled after the cleanup process. City Attorney Andrew Sickman said at the Thursday news conference. Whether or not there can be potential criminal liability will be a question for law enforcement and prosecutors. The only operation running out of the building before the fire was moving materials out and shipping them overseas as ordered by officials, Sickman said. It's his mess. It's been shown again and again. It's his mess. Snow said of the owner. Everything that's ensued here remains his responsibility. The city is tracking all costs of the incident in case of potential litigation, he asked. He added. The facility was unsafe, city panel had found. Richmond's Unsafe Building Commission in 2019 had found the cumulative effect of the code violations present at the recycling facility rendered the premise unsafe, substandard, or a danger to the health and safety of the public, according to the meeting minutes obtained by CNN. Hey man, how you doing? Welcome, welcome. We're reading an article about the plastic recycling plant fire. How you doing? Over here. Our first set of articles we read was on the International Criminal Court and the U.S.'s sanctions against it and its interference into investigations into the U.S.'s war crimes. This is the first article we're reading of the two on the plastic recycling plant. I need more caffeine. I've got D&D tomorrow, Dungeons and Dragons. So that's cool. I'm excited about that. My second monitor died. I'm only clearing off one monitor, though it is 32 inches, so it's not quite so bad. Still, it's taking a lot of space. I'll keep reading while I'm reading. Richmond, let's see. Okay. During a commission hearing, Smith admitted one of the buildings on the property had no fire extinguisher system, the records show. After Smith was ordered by the City Building Commission to repair or demolish and vacate his properties in 2019, the plant owner and his company petitioned a court to review the order. Indiana Circuit Court judge ruled in favor of the city in March 2020. Court found in part Smith's properties constitute a fire hazard and are a hazard to public health, constitute a nuisance, and are dangerous to the people or property because of violations of statute and city ordinance concerning buildings, condition, and maintenance. The city last year seized 2 of the 3 land parcels the recycling plant sits on after Smith failed to pay property taxes. Oh, okay. It removed vehicles from the site, but couldn't take away other materials because the business owner objected to them being removed and disposed of, Sickman said. Additionally, a bank had security interests in the materials, he said. The city struck a deal with the business owner, allowing him to remove the materials and sell them pursuant to his normal course of business. There you go. How's your school going? Well, from ProPublica, and I couldn't find the date on here. No date. Okay, come on, people, give me dates. So, EPA proposes major air pollution reforms to lower residents' cancer risk near industrial facilities. EPA has proposed tougher air pollution rules for chemical plants and other industrial facilities after ProPublica found an estimated 74 million Americans near the sites faced an elevated risk of cancer. We read an article on this. Okay, so this is not directly related to do this here. It's indirectly related to it. The Laredo sterilization plant, owned by Midwest Sterilization Corporation, released far more ethyl oxide on average than any plant of its kind in the country during the 5-year period covered by ProPublica's analysis. Okay, April 13th. Okay, so this is just 2 days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago. The Environmental Protection Agency proposed a series of major reforms this past week to slash toxic air pollution at chemical plants and facilities that sterilize medical equipment, nearly 18 months after ProPublica reported how an estimated 74 million Americans were exposed to elevated cancer risk from these businesses. First set of rules place stricter limits on roughly 80 air pollutants, according to EPA Administrator Michael S. Reagan. The list includes potent cancer-causing chemicals such as ethylene oxide, which is used to sterilize medical equipment, and chloroprene, an ingredient in synthetic rubber. The proposal, which would affect more than 200 manufacturers, requires air monitoring around these chemical plants, something local communities have long requested. Yeah, that should be a no-brainer, honestly. Actually, in a sense, the local government would be good for the local city and county government to actually have sensors out there themselves so they can monitor air quality and figure out what's going on with the air quality in their areas. Reagan announced the first wave of changes last Thursday at a press conference in St. John, the Baptist parish, Louisiana. The area falls within an 85-mile stretch along the Mississippi River known as Cancer Alley due to its concentration of industrial polluters, many of which are located near communities of color. Of course they are. For generations, our most vulnerable communities have unjustly borne the burden of breathing unsafe polluted air, Reagan said in a statement. Yep. Every child in this country deserves clean air to breathe, and EPA will use every available tool to make that vision a reality. EPA declined to make any agency employees available for an interview. Environmental experts said the proposal is a huge step forward. The updated rules impose stricter health standards for emissions of chloroprene and ethyl oxide to reduce the risk of cancer. I mean, honestly, the limits should be zero. None of this stuff should be able to come out. I mean, look at a circular economy. Every single byproduct of any manufacturing should be captured and sent to somewhere else for processing or recycling or reuse, whatever. There should be zero emissions from any product for the most part. Environmental experts said the proposal is a huge step forward. The updated rules impose stricter health standards for emissions of chloroprene and ethylene oxide to reduce cancer residents face when they breathe pollution from chemical plants. The proposal would also require facilities to fix leaks and install devices to limit emissions from smokestacks, storage tanks, and other equipment. If the new rules are adopted, the number of residents near these facilities who would be exposed to unacceptable cancer risk ultimately would drop by 96%, the EPA said. That's nice. It's a very big announcement that targets the largest and most hazardous chemical manufacturers, said Adam Cron, an attorney at Earth Justice. The group sued the EPA years ago to force them to update these rules in a more timely manner. And it's pretty sad that a lawsuit had to happen in order for them to do something, in addition to the ProPublica making it obvious by putting their report together. Beverly Wright, executive director of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, said in a statement that this was the most significant rule I've seen in my 30 years of experience working in Valley. The American Chemistry Council and industry trade group said that it was reviewing the proposed new rules, but signaled it was concerned about aspects related to ethylene oxide. Overly conservative regulations on ethylene oxide could threaten access to products ranging from electric vehicle batteries to sterilized medical equipment, the group wrote on its website. We support strong science-based regulations for our industry, but we are concerned that the EPA may be rushing its work. It's been almost 2 years, dude, on significant rulemaking packages. We will be engaging closely throughout the comment and review process. In 2021, ProPublica published a unique analysis of cumulative cancer risk from industrial air pollution nationwide. I'm pretty sure we covered this. Okay? I think we covered this. I think we did. Using emissions data reported by the companies, we found that in some parts of Louisiana's Cancer Alley, the added lifetime cancer risk from these chemicals was up to 47 times what the EPA considers acceptable. Many residents who live near multiple facilities face unacceptable cancer risks from combined emissions. Yet the EPA rarely considers cumulative risk. Out of all the pollutants that the EPA regulates, ProPublica's analysis found, ethylene oxide is the most toxic, contributing to the majority of the excess cancer risk created by industrial air pollution. Yeah, and I'm fairly sure that article by ProPublica that I'm pretty sure we covered last year, talked about that. It's the cumulative effect. If you've got 10, the effects of one of these companies in a small area releasing that into the air is much less than if you have 10 in the area releasing that, right? So it's not just it's not taking things into account into the environment. That's the big problem. On a business by business scope and not the entire city or geographic area. Our work spurred reform, including additional air monitoring, 2 state cancer studies, and the EPA's rejection of a less stringent health standard for ethylene oxide. Weeks after we published our series, Reagan said that the agency would conduct a series of unannounced EPA inspections of major polluters. The EPA's new proposed rules, though, go even further. The agency's proposal also requires many facilities to conduct air monitoring and make the resulting data publicly available. Yeah, on top of limiting emissions of 80 pollutants, chemical plants for the first time would monitor for 6 chemicals: benzene, ethylene oxide, chloropylene, vinyl chloride, ethylene dichloride, and 1.3 butadiene at the fence line or perimeter of the facilities. If annual averages exceed EPA guidelines, the companies would need to find and repair any leaks that were likely to cause excessive. So one of the issues with the companies, of course, themselves doing the monitoring themselves, they can get crappy sensors or put things together in such a way that it helps to mitigate the actual readings of things. Unless there are strict guidelines about how and where to place sensors and the quality of the sensors and that sort of thing. That would have to be. That should be a part of the ruling as well. Scott Throw, a former EPA air pollution expert who now works as a consultant, said the EPA could have gone further by requiring direct, continuous monitoring of toxic air pollutants at the vents, smokestacks, and other outlets where emissions are released. Yep, that would be good too. Agreed. Fence line monitoring only tells you that something is leaking, he said, and doesn't help you identify the exact piece of equipment responsible. Yeah, agreed. These facilities are so large that each plant may have thousands of potential leak spots. We're not going to find it in 5 minutes and slap some silly putty on the leak and call it a day, he said. If the EPA required direct monitoring at the source, he added, it would be much easier to pinpoint the culprit. Despite the drawbacks, fence line monitoring could give regulators a new straightforward tool to crack down on polluters. A neoprene manufacturer in Laplace, Louisiana has faced years of enforcement action from state and federal agencies. It continues to emit high levels of chloroprene. Chemical can cause liver and lung cancer. Local emissions are so high that the EPA urged state regulators to evacuate students from the nearby 5th Ward Elementary School last fall. The students have not been removed. Jesus Christ. The plant owned by Denka Performance Elastomer already has chloroprene monitors at more than 20 locations along its perimeter. New EPA proposal would regulate chloroprene concentrations at the fence line for the first time, using 0.3 micrograms per cubic meter as a limit. When annual concentrations exceed that, companies would need to reduce their emissions. Yeah, but it takes a year of... Christ. But that's a year of emissions going above that should be destroying people's lives. Data around the Denka plant from January 2022 to January 2023 shows that nearly all of the monitors exceeded this new proposed threshold. Monitors close to the school showed levels up to 5 times the limit. Denka didn't respond to requests for comment. In February, the U.S. Department of Justice sued the company on behalf of the EPA to compel Denka to cut chloroprene emissions. Denka has denied many of the allegations in a counterclaim that the EPA's conclusions about the high cancer risk posed by chloroprene are dead wrong. The new EPA rules don't just apply to facilities that make chemicals. Second EPA proposal announced Tuesday that require 86 facilities across the country that use ethylene oxide for sterilizing medical supplies or fumigating spices to install equipment to reduce emissions of the cancer-causing gas. The EPA estimated the rule would reduce ethylene oxide emissions from facilities by 80%. Both EPA proposals are open for public comment and could be finalized by next year. Oh my god, it takes so fucking long. We'll see how much that this gets watered down by corporate lobbyists and money train, right? Tuesday's proposal is based on the latest EPA science on ethylene oxide. In 2016, the agency concluded the chemical was 30 times more carcinogenic to people who continuously inhale it as adults and 50 times more carcinogenic for those who are exposed since birth than the agency previously thought. Industry representatives have described the EPA's conclusion as extreme and overly protective. If it's not overly protective, then what's the fucking point, right? People's lives are at stake because you can't profit off, murdering people and destroying people's lives for fun and corporate profit doesn't mean most assuredly should be done. You can't do business without murdering people, destroying their lives, then you probably shouldn't be in business. Prior regulations for sterilizing facilities were based on outdated scientific studies. The agency was supposed to review the rule for possible revision in 2014 and 2022, but missed both deadlines. I'm sure lobbying money didn't have anything to do with that, right? Coalition of environmental groups, including the Laredo, Texas-based Rio Grande International Study Center, sued the EPA in December to speed up the timeline. The lawsuit is still pending. Laredo, a border city of 250,000, has become the home to the most toxic commercial sterilizer in the country, according to the 2021 ProPublica analysis. Today, residents of Laredo are a step closer to breathing cleaner air, said Laredo City Council member Vanessa Perez, who co-founded the Clean Air Laredo Coalition in 2021. The EPA's mission to ensure our air is safe to breathe. We are relying on the EPA's ruling to move the country in the right direction for environmental protection and justice. Owned by Missouri-based Midwest Sterilization Corporation, the Laredo plant released far more ethylene oxide on average than any plant of its kind in the country during the 5-year period covered by ProPublica's analysis. In a statement, Midwest Sterilization said the company sterilizes life-saving medical devices used in everyday medical procedures and surgeries. The company has said it's been anticipating the proposed EPA rule and working hard to make changes ahead of its release to the public. It added, it's important to note that most of the changes proposed by the EPA have already been achieved by Midwest and are currently being implemented. Yeah, I don't. Interesting to see if they actually make the changes. Environmental groups celebrated the release of the long overdue proposal, but also said it should be strengthened before it is finalized. They want the EPA to require fence line monitoring of ethylene oxide at sterilizing facilities like the agency is proposing for chemical plants, and to expand the rule to cover emissions from off-site warehouses that also are a significant source of emissions. But they also called for the EPA to phase out the use of ethylene oxide. Okay, that's all good stuff. I mean, so they should issue much broader guidance that if you're using any sort of chemical to do anything, you should require monitoring and to keep everything below, keep all levels every day of the year below the safe threshold, right? Just not like these specific chemicals, but all chemicals. Everything, every byproduct should always be captured and recycled through a circular economy. Last year's studies published by Texas Department of State Health Services found that rates of 3 types of cancer associated with ethylene oxide exposure: breast cancer, all-age acute lymphocytic leukemia, and extranodal non-Hodgkin lymphoma, were significantly greater than expected in Laredo given the population. The ProPublica analysis found that the Laredo facility elevates the estimated lifetime cancer risk for nearly half of the city's residents, including 37,000 children, to a level experts say is not sufficiently protective of public health. Among them is Yaneli Ortiz, who was diagnosed with acute lymphocytic leukemia in 2019. She had just turned 13 years old. Ethylene dioxide should not be ruled out as a factor in Yaneli's diagnosis, given her proximity to the facility and its history of emissions, environmental health experts said, but it is impossible to definitively say whether exposure to chemical caused her cancer. Right, and see, that's one of the things with this, right? The profits are privatized to the company, and then oh my god, my brain can't even think of the phrase. And the negative externalities are privatized. So the people like this Yaneli has to deal with the costs of having cancer, having gotten it from the exposure to this chemical and other chemicals that the company was giving off. After Yaneli underwent years of treatment that include a harrowing near-death experience, doctors recently told her and her parents that there are no signs of cancer in her body. So, okay, I want to talk about this. I talked about this before. This is part of my policies, right? The issue here we have is that companies' primary motivation is profits. And the Supreme Court has held that, right? They have an obligation to maximize their profits and to their shareholders. Profits and the payout to the shareholders and that sort of thing, right? So our businesses and the way they're put together needs to be redefined by law, corporate law, LLCs, and all that sort of thing. So that the first thing that they are rated on is how well they're doing for humanity. Second, how well they're doing for the environment. And as a tertiary consideration would be profit. Because if you are murdering people because you're giving them cancer and you're destroying the environment because you're releasing harmful gases, right? Your business would be rated very, very low on those two scales, and therefore your taxes would go up. You wouldn't have access to federal contracts, right? And things of that nature. And if you're continually rated low on those areas, you would lose the business or something like that would happen, right? So this is a primary issue with capitalism and the things that they find important, which is only profit. The only thing that capitalism corporations care about is market efficiency, which is profit efficiency. They don't care about actual technical efficiency or the environment or people or anything. Just big Benjamins, and that's it. Yaneli is dealing with the fallout from the side effects of her treatment, particularly from the havoc that the steroids wreak on her hips, shoulders, and knees. She underwent replacement surgery for her hip and left shoulder. Recently, her right shoulder has been hurting so much that pain keeps her awake at night. Her mother anticipates that Yaneli will need 2 more surgeries to address the injuries. Jesus Christ. Nevertheless, she recently attended prom at Driscoll Children's Hospital in Corpus Christi. Her cancer was treated. Now 16 years old, Yaneli spent a good part of the night dancing. It's like a little bit of relief, Yaneli's mother, Carla Ortiz, said when she heard the news about the proposed EP rules. Less risky for everyone else as well, so hopefully they won't have to go through what we went through or other families went. There you go. Okay. All right, so we're gonna be off some of that toxic environmental stuff, and we got this one post here. This is from Jason Hickel about universal public services, the power of decommodifying survival. This is from April 11th, 2 days ago. I think he is the one who wrote the article about the using MMT, modern monetary theory, to decolonize Africa. And it was a really amazing article. And I used that to add a new section to my blog post on how a resource-based economy being. I called it the Pan-African Decolonized Union. Kind of use that his post as the basis of that new option. So, all right, here we go. One of the central insights emerging from research on degrowth and climate mitigation is that universal public services are crucial to a just and effective transition. Capitalism relies on maintaining an artificial scarcity of essential goods and services like housing, healthcare, transport, etc., through processes of enclosure and commodification. We know that enclosure enables monopolists to raise prices and maximize their profits. The rental market, the U.S. healthcare system, or the British rail system. It also has another effect. When essential goods are privatized and expensive, people need more income than they would otherwise require to access them. To get it, they are compelled to increase their labor in capitalist markets, working to produce new things that may not be needed, with increased energy use, resource use, and ecological pressure, simply to access things that clearly are needed and which are quite often already there. Take housing, for example. If rent goes up, you suddenly have to work more just to keep the same roof over your head. At an economy-wide level, this dynamic means we need more aggregate production, more growth, in order to meet basic needs. From the perspective of capital, this ensures a steady flow of labor to private firms and maintains downward pressures on wages, facilitate capital accumulation. For the rest of us, it means needless exploitation, insecurity, and ecological damage. Artificial scarcity also creates growth dependence. Survival is mediated by prices and wages. When productivity improvements and recessions lead to unemployment, people suffer loss of access to goods, even when the output of those goods is not affected, and growth is needed to create new jobs and resolve the social crisis. There is a way out of this trap: decommodifying essential goods and services. We can eliminate artificial scarcity and ensure public abundance, healing human well-being from growth and reduce growthist pressures. Yeah, you're just going to be talking about universal basic services, which we've talked about before. I think we talked about this a little bit ago, that I haven't added this to my policies yet. I haven't quite gotten to it yet, but I really, really do need to. So, yeah, let's see what he has to say. This approach also has several other direct social and ecological benefits. For one, it can have a strong positive impact on human welfare. We know from empirical studies that public services are a powerful driver of improvements in life expectancy, well-being, and other key social indicators. Here, and here. Yeah, these are bad links. Bad link. Yep, need better links. Better links here. Those are not accessible. Universal services would also end the current cost of living crisis by directly reducing the cost of living. We also know that countries with decommodified or otherwise universal public services can deliver better social outcomes at any given level of GDP and resource here, and here. Universal services ensure an efficient conversion of resources and energy into outcomes. Furthermore, as we will see, public control over provisioning systems makes it easier to achieve rapid decarbonization in sectors. So yeah, and this all boils down to, as equality goes up, quality of life and everything goes, all the good stuff goes up and all the bad things goes down, because rates of crime and depression and suicide and all sorts of things are directly proportional to the level of equity within the community. So using universal basic services, make sure people have housing, internet, education, healthcare, and all that, and transportation, and all that sort of stuff would greatly increase social and life outcomes in general for everyone and make life better for everyone. I mean, this is the primary thought and driver behind a resource economy, that everyone has free access to everything, that pretty much eliminates all crime for the most part. I mean, there'll be different sorts of crimes, but it'll very much change, and it'll be just very very different than it is today because of the high level of equity that will exist. Finally, together with the second key policy, the public job guarantee, this approach would permanently end economic insecurity and resolve the current contradiction between social and ecological objectives. Right now, it is impossible to take even obvious steps towards climate mitigation, such as scaling down fossil fuel production and other destructive sectors, because people in affected industries would lose access to wages, housing, healthcare, etc. No one should accept it. No one should accept an outcome. Okay, what sort of outcome? He's missing something there. With universal services and emancipatory job guarantee, we can protect against any economic insecurity and guarantee a just transition. There is no necessary contradiction between ecological and social objectives. The two can and must be pursued together. Yeah, agreed. But yeah, you can tell he's very much pro MMT, and that's kind of one of the big talking points for MMT advocates is the job guarantee. And if you look at the Green New Deal, that the Justice Democrats and AOC put out there, that's kind of the approach that they had as well. And I tend to agree with that as well. If you've got the federal jobs guarantee and you pour it into green jobs and other jobs of value to the actual community, instead of just doing things for the sake of doing things, making profit for the sake of making profit and providing no actual value to the community, then things can radically change. And you can focus those jobs in that actually matter, like mass transit, universal healthcare, universal daycare, and all those sorts of things that can make a really huge difference to everyone in the community. And you can also, as a part of that, with the government paying for it, ensure that the buildings that are built have mass transit, that they are built sustainably, like hempcrete, green roofs, right, and various things like that are powered by sustainable energy, and so on and so forth. You can take those coal plants, you can convert them to geothermal, all sorts of amazing things that can be done with something. By universal services here, I mean not only healthcare and education, housing, transit, food, energy, water, and communications. In other words, a decommodification of the core social sector, the means of everyday survival. And I mean attractive, high-quality, democratically managed, properly universal services, not the purposefully shitty last resort system in the US and other neoliberal countries. What does this look like? How do we get there? Yeah, and this is the sort of stuff that I generally talk about. I haven't quite implemented I did say nationalize banks, nationalize education and healthcare. Yeah, I haven't gone quite that way to everything else yet, I don't think. Or public ownership to all this stuff yet. I really do need to. Healthcare and education. This one is common. Most European countries have universal healthcare and education systems, many of which rank as the best health systems in the world. The key principle is that healthcare should be free at point of use, ideally through a public provider, without the intermediation of expensive private insurers. Similarly, public education should be tuition free from primary school through university. Existing debts accrued for healthcare and education should be canceled. Agreed. Housing costs constitute a large portion of housing expenses. This is an essential good. It's necessary as healthcare and education, yet people often spend 30 to 50% of their wages on rent for housing that is often woefully substandard, and buying a house is in many places increasingly unaffordable to anyone who is rich. It is important to recognize a distinction between owning one's own residence, fine, and private control of rental units, which is where problems arise, particularly in the case of large corporate landlords that control dozens or even thousands of homes. The latter represents closure of a key resource that is fundamental for survival. We don't tolerate this for healthcare, but for some reason we regularly do it with housing, because their lobbying is very strong and they can continuously make sure that there isn't regulation in this area. And I can pretty much guarantee you that the Realtors Association and the Landlords Association, so on and so forth, try and make sure that none of this comes to bear, even though it's what is exactly needed to happen. One effective intervention would be simply to limit the number of rental units that any individual or firm can own and require the sale of surplus properties. The influx of housing into the market would drive prices down, making it more affordable for people to buy a residence, but also making it more affordable for city governments to buy units, expand public housing stock, and improve the quality of housing, which would be naturally integrated into the fabric of the city. Public rental units can then be available on an affordable basis, and any remaining private rental units would need to have rates low enough to compete with the public option. Yep, Vienna and Singapore offer a model for attractive, high-quality public housing that is enjoyed by 60-80% of the population. We've covered both of these. The Vienna one, we've covered several times here, and yeah, when I think about public housing, what we need to be looking at is somewhere on the scale of like a 3-4 star hotel. It needs to have significant amenities. You can have small store, small post office, small entertainment area. Maybe you have a local, maybe primary school there, a daycare there, right? Small business center that people can go to and use for their stuff, right? Try and keep these, and you want a vertical farm there as well, so that you can grow as much food as possible. Yeah, so that's the kind of level we need to be looking at for public housing, so that it's not just, like you said, shitty housing. It needs to be good housing that people actually want to live in. If we can guarantee the quality of life for the people in your community, that makes sure that people are happy. If people are happy, crime goes down, right? Everyone's happier. Social trust goes up, violence goes down, racism goes down, all the bad things go down. You have nothing but to gain from high quality housing and support like that. And such an approach can be used to achieve rapid efficiency improvements in the housing sector, including insulation, heat pumps, and efficient appliances, thus helping to rapid decarbonization. Public transit should be available for free or very cheap. Barcelona provides a good example, where metro and tram journeys across the city's bright, clean, and efficient system cost only €1, and e-bikes cost a fraction of that. But nearly 100 cities around the world go further and offer free public transit. That's exactly what we need. We've read articles on this too. Places where existing public transit infrastructure is inadequate, it should be developed to the point where people do not need cars on a regular basis. High-quality public transit is critical to reducing demand for cars and reducing transport. Agreed. And I think about that for here in my small town. It's like, God, so expensive to implement because our city isn't set up like that. And we're a small enough town, 15,000 people, that is just money. Where do you get the money? It has to be done pretty much on a massive scale, like statewide, nationwide, to even have any sort of a real chance to do this. Without significant outside investment or significant high levels of taxation, especially on the rich, which I talk about in my policies, and on corporations. Our food system suffers from several problems. Many people cannot afford or access nutritious food, even in the world's richest nations. Supermarkets tend to be controlled overwhelmingly by a few large corporations, which prioritize profitable processed foods, with supply chains that rely heavily on plastic packaging and long-distance transport. The model is highly energy and monoculture intensive, with vast tracts of land appropriated for industrial meat production, which leads to deforestation, emissions, soil depletion, and biodiversity loss. Food Justice Program could ensure universal access to nutritious, regenerative, vegetarian food. Governments can fund the development of regenerative farms, as well as food gardens in urban and suburban areas, which produce with produce sold at affordable prices through community hubs in every neighborhood that can double as cafeterias, serving vegetarian meals. Yeah, that's a good idea. these would be convenient and attractive places for anyone to shop and eat, providing high quality foods covering all necessary nutritional needs while facilitating conviviality and community engagement. Agreed. Such a system would improve health outcomes and also help to dramatically reduce land use and the ecological impact of food. So, now the one thing he doesn't go to is vertical farming, which I think is highly problematic. I mean, everything he's talking about here is exactly good. It's the stuff that I talk about. He's right on the money here. So for farming, what I've talked about here is that like the county government or the city, most likely the county government, can work with local farmers and say, hey, we'd like to buy, like got these 3 farms next to each other. We'd like to buy all 3 of the land, or pay you for them, and then we're going to pay you and help you to afford to taking 10% of your land and shifting it to vertical farming. So 10% land will be shifted to vertical farming, and vertical farming can take up 10%. You can get, for the same amount of food, it takes up 10% of the land and uses 10% of the water and fertilizer and all that sort of stuff. So you would take that 100 acres per se, and 10% of it turns into a vertical farm, going up and down, and not just one story, but going down into the ground to help increase, so that we can take advantage of geothermal, earth sheltered as well, as much as possible. That way, you can, instead of growing food just during the summer, you grow food 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You get significantly more food out of it. Then the rest of the farmland, you could spend some of that and turn it into permaculture-based farming and stuff like that. That you could do. But what might be better in the long run is to regreen that area, just turn it into green space, so that get the natural grasses and trees and stuff to grow there again. The more of the green space we have, the better it is for the environment. Now, there are some foods that we won't be able to grow inside a vertical farm, and we will need to grow some of it outside in actual normal farm space. That will still have to be a thing. I don't know what those are. I'm just saying I'm sure there's something that can't be grown inside vertical farming, so we're going to have to still use some of the farmland for farming. But that is what communities should be doing. If you can do that, maybe you've got 3 or 4 farms together, county buys it, supports shifting all those to vertical farming to make sure we have the same amount of food or more coming out of it at any given moment, and then green the rest of it. And then that food can go to help feed the community housing and stuff like that, as well as the community, the smaller community farms and greenhouses there as well too. Help make sure everyone has. So yeah, he needs to talk about shifting to vertical farming here. All right, energy and water. These are essentials to human survival. Energy and water should be run as public utilities with a 2-tier pricing system. A quota of energy and water should be made available for free to all households, adjusted for the number of residents, sufficient to meet basic needs. Additional use of energy and water beyond this quota can be charged at a progressive rate to disincentivize excess throughput, delivering yet further benefits to the environment. The approach tends to have strong popular support. The public energy system can be used to reduce fossil fuel used on a science-based schedule and prioritize a rapid transition to renewables. While rules governing the public water system can be used to prevent over-extraction by private firms and ensure a stable and equitable allocated supply of water during droughts. Okay, I could see this possibly going wrong, but sure, okay. I have to learn more about this. Communications, internet access and mobile phone data are necessary for daily life and should be treated as public utilities. Yep. A basic monthly package should be available to individuals or households for free, with additional data and other services available at market rates. The public provider would be fully independent from the government, with cutting-edge data security to preclude any state censorship. Much like the Postal Service's not read the letters it delivers, the public data network should be designed to protect privacy. Agreed? How to pay for it? The traditional answer is to pay that pay for public services, first need more GDP growth. Increase corporate production of stuff we don't need, then tax the revenues, production, fund the public production of stuff we do need. This assumption is so entrenched in the public imagination that it's completely taken for granted, leveraged by the right to claim that public services are somehow given to us by the rich, people who pay the most taxes, which of course is quite often not even true. Exactly. So we should therefore be grateful to them and do whatever it takes to let them accumulate more. It is also ecologically dangerous. We need things like public transit and renewable energy to meet our climate goals. If we need more corporate growth to pay for these things, it increases total energy demand, makes decarbonization more difficult to achieve. In reality, there's no reason that public production needs to rely on funding from prior private production, as if corporations somehow produce money, which of course they do not. Any government that has sufficient monetary sovereignty can mobilize public production directly simply by issuing public finance to do it. As Keynes pointed out, anything we can actually do in terms of productive capacity, we can pay for. And when it comes to productive capacity, high-income economies already have far more than they need. Deploying public finance simply shifts the use of this capacity from corporations to the public, where it can be used for democratically ratified social and ecological objectives rather than for... So, this is really leaning into the MMT aspect, which is 100% correct. He doesn't really explain this well enough. Honestly, I can basically explain what he's talking about here. It's that the concept of MMT, where the federal government is not financed by taxation. Taxation has zero to do with federal spending. To pay for anything at the federal level, all the Congress has to do is pass a law, and then the money is managed there, because there's some, keyboard monkey accountant who just adds a bunch of zeros to the appropriate congressional spending account, and boom, spending's there. We're done. We can pay for everything. That's all we need. Just a little extra energy, add a few more zeros to the count, and we're good to go. So Congress passes the bill, the money is magically there, and then they spend the money to buy that farmland, pay for the shift to sustainable energy, pay for the shift to vertical farming, to purchase a bunch of housing for public use, right? That's all it needs. The federal government can fund it all and pay for it, and taxation doesn't have to do anything with it. Now, as a part of that, we do need to deal with taxation, because we need to decrease inequality, because that has a direct effect on the level of health and outcomes and happiness across in the world. There's there's a bunch of amazing books in my policies. 5 books you need to read that I talk about there. Spirit Level and the Inner Level by the same group, 2009, 2019, and then the New Human Rights Movement by Peter Joseph. Read those 3 books. They are amazing reads. So that's what he's talking about there. So federal government could pass the law to create the funding and then shit it out to the various, either to the state governments to distribute to the various communities, or they can be given straight to the communities themselves. I'm not sure which way they would probably go. The issue with potentially sending it to the state governments, a bunch of right-wing state governments like we do here in the U.S. and Wisconsin, that it's not going to be used for what it needs to be used for. And also, as a part of Congress passing that sort of a law, they would have to have very careful controls over where that money was going and what it was doing and that sort of thing. Oh, so what they would do this through the standpoint of the federal, from the Green New Deal and the federal jobs guarantee, and they would have communities put together the actual list of things that need to be done and the housing they need, and so the federal government could set the set it up so that money is here for this and this and this, that communities can get the money for, and once the communities create their organization to search for, determine what we need here, then they can apply for the funding. That's probably the way it would work. That's the kind of perspective that I think he's talking about. Yeah, community by community. All right, this same approach can be used to fund a public job guarantee. Job guarantee will permanently end unemployment and ensure that anyone who wants to wants to can train and participate in the most important collective projects of our generation, expanding renewable energy capacity, regenerating ecosystems, improving public services, care work, etc. Urgent, socially necessary production with living wages and workplace democracy. Job guarantee would help reorient labor towards social and ecological use value rather than serving corporate profit. The program would have to be financed by the government, the currency issuer, right, the federal government, but should be democratically managed at the appropriate level of locality. Determine what forms of production are most necessary to meet community. Right. And of course, a basic income should be available to anyone who cannot work and who, for whatever reason, not to. Right, right. So this is, again, what I was talking about. What was talked about during the Green New Deal, and NMT people talking about the use of federal jobs guarantee and that sort of thing. That local communities will decide what sort of work they want to use or to prioritize, and then it gets paid for from there. That way, we can fund caregivers, we can fund stay-at-home parents, we can fund vertical farming and solar panels and that sort of a thing. Then, of course, a universal basic income is also required as well. So if you have universal basic services, there's definitely going to be, you won't need as much UBI going on. Although, of course, the danger in this, if you have housing and healthcare and education and transportation and communication, all that stuff taken care of by the universal basic services, you're definitely not going to need as much money coming because your basics are taken care of, right? All your survival needs are taken care of. So the issue here, and this is what a lot of people talk about when talking about UBI or universal basic services, is that, well, eventually they're just gonna, the right is gonna start cutting these things. Money's just gonna go away, right? Yeah, that's gonna be a thing, and that's I talk about this in my tension methods of change thing. Post that we have to maintain vigilance so that right-wing nut jobs such as Trump or Biden, right-winger too, don't try and destroy these things. And they're going to. It's not a matter of if they're going to, cut back on the funding for mass transportation or cut back on funding for community housing and all that sort of stuff. They will. They're going to. It's just a matter of when they do it, the people need to be ready to say no. Because there's no other way. There's too much money involved in government, especially at the federal level. Fight back. People have to be there and not re-elect them or recall them and do all sorts of other public things to make sure that these fuckhead lawmakers don't defund these things. This idea proves wildly popular in polls, and the additional power of the job guarantee is that it can be used to set standards for wages and working time, shortening the work week to say 32 hours, and workplace democracy across the whole economy, as private firms would come under pressure to adopt standards similar to the job guarantee or otherwise risk losing staff. Because if people can opt to do dignified, socially important work in a democratic workplace, then why would they agree to do meaningless labor under worse conditions for corporate firms whose primary goal is to just accumulate capital? They wouldn't. Right, so exactly right. So yeah, part of this federal job guarantee could be the 4-day work week, a $30 minimum wage. It could be our workplaces are unionized, right? So it starts with all these things that they should have already that really set the terms for them. Power of universal public services is that we can improve people's access to goods necessary for decent living with provisioning systems that require less aggregate energy, material use, and which allow us to accelerate decarbonization. Is he using double spacing at the end of the sentence? I just noticed that here. Yes. Interesting. Here he isn't. More? Yes, he's double spacing. I've been torn on this. I've done some research on this and thinking on this. I'll talk about that after this. These outcomes can be further enhanced by ensuring strong democratic governance of public systems, together with the job guarantee. Economic security is permanently abolished, accomplishing a goal that growth alone has never been able to achieve. And human well-being is delinked from the requirement of ever-increasing production. This would change the political landscape, freeing us to pursue necessary climate action without any risk to employment and livelihoods, while improving social outcomes, reducing inequality, and facilitating a shift towards a more just and ecological economy. Yep. These policies should be core demands of a united climate and labor movement. Universal services, a job guarantee, living wages, shorter working week. These are popular interventions that could provide basis for mass political support. For the labor movement, we need to stop pretending that capitalist growth will magically end unemployment, ensure living wages, and bring workplace democracy, which it never does, and instead fight to achieve these objectives directly. And for the climate movement, which is often accused of ignoring the material conditions of working class communities, this approach addresses real bread and butter needs and creates cause for alliances with working class formations, the political movement. Yeah, I agree, 100%. This is definitely what we need. It needs to be done at the federal level, of course, because that is where the fund is at Congress. But it's just never going to get done because lobbying and our president and Congress is owned by corporations and the rich, right? That's the problem we've had this whole time. We the people have no say in the government. We never have, and we probably never will. But yes, Jason Hickel here is 100% right. I agree. All right, questions, comments, or suggestions before we move on? Super quiet. Oh. Oh. Good article. All right, now we get into some climate change stuff. I think we have just like one or two articles on climate change. I do. There we go. All right. New York City breaks heat records set in 1977 as temperatures soar to 90 degrees. Need more green spaces. Big Apple's, when was this written? This is for 13th, days ago. The Big Apple's early summer weather is heating up the history books. New York peaked at 90 degrees in Central Park Thursday, shattering heat records set in the 70s with weather rarely seen in spring, meteorologists said. Temperatures climbed higher than previous record for the day set in 1977 at 80 degrees as New Yorkers busted out sunscreen and suffered through sweltering outdoor jobs. So, it's spring and already 88 degrees. That's insane. It's only going to get worse as we go on. See me sweating through my shirt, and I'm on my second Gatorade. I'm not used to it yet, said Esteban Rivas, a 40-year-old furniture mover who was delivering on the Upper East Side. Everyone's half naked today. It's been brutal. I'm just trying to stay out of the sun. It's too quick of a change. Flip from hot to cold. I need some time to adjust, he said. Fox weather meteorologist Marissa Lautenbacher recommended that New Yorkers take heat wave-like precautions. Forecast high of 90, roughly 25 degrees above average for the time year. Even though it is April, if you're going to be outside for an extended period of time, wear that sunscreen. There's really not a cloud in the sky, she said. It will feel nice, but if you start to feel fatigued, move inside. The unseasonably summery weather is forecast to last through Friday, which will see a sunny high of 86 before temps cool with scattered showers on Saturday. Part of this issue with the heat is that we're in a giant ass city that has, a steel and concrete city, and there's very little, if any, green spaces reduced. You need more green spaces to reduce that temperature. The Untethered Soul. A small book. Temperatures rarely reach 90s until late May in New York City, so this is significantly earlier than average. Lautenbacher said the city has only reached 90 degrees during the month of April 19 times since record keeping began in 1969. We're getting all this warm air from the south, she said, adding the conditions pose a wildfire threat. It's warm, windy, and dry. And it's only going to get worse. Temperatures in Newark, New Jersey also soared to 91 degrees Thursday, beating a heat record set at 87 degrees in 1997, said Fox weather meteorologist Steve Cloud. Much of the East Coast, including parts of New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, is also forecast to enjoy clear skies and warm weather. Yeah, and this is just going to continue getting worse and worse as the South warms up. The air is going to get hotter down there. It's going to keep pushing the warm streams up here, which is just going to get warmer and warmer until we're mega ultra bad on the planet. Okay, look at this. Look at this. Someone needs to fix this site. Come on, people. Not good, people. All right, this is from the 13th. Tunisia drought threatens catastrophic grain harvest. This is really severe drought in North Africa has left Tunisian farmers bracing for a catastrophically poor harvest, imperiling food security in the cash-strapped country. At a time when the global cereal market have been disrupted by the Ukraine war, Tunisia's domestic grain production has also withered under lack of rainfall that has killed off crops. Even before the roasting summer months, the soil is dry and dusty in the small Mediterranean country whose water resources is steadily depleting as climate change intensifies. Yep, we've never seen a drought this bad, said wheat farmer Tahar Kawachi, walking despondently through his field, 55 kilometers, 35 miles inland from the capital, Tunis. It's been dry for the last 4 years, but we expected some rain this season. Instead, it's become worse. With some Tunisian water reservoirs almost completely dry, authorities imposed emergency measures last month, rationing household supplies and banning water use for washing cars as well as for irrigating fields. Production is at zero, said Chawachi, whose farmland lies in Beja province, a key grain production area since the days of the Roman Empire. The situation is unsustainable. We're losing everything we spend on seeds, fertilizer, pesticides, and wages. He said. No telling where things are heading. Oh, we know exactly where things are heading. Global South is going to be devastated under climate change, and then global food and water resources are going to dry up, and then wars and violence over resources start happening. And the people in the Global South are the ones who are going to suffer the most from this because they don't have the political leverage, the economic leverage, or any leverage. They're just going to die. Suffer and die. Which is why, as a part of the climate package I talk about in my climate policies, is that we need to be literally sending trillions and trillions of dollars to the Global South reparations for the horrors inflicted upon them over hundreds of years of imperialism and colonialism, so that they can start bringing out desalinization plants, so they can start creating vertical farms, so they can start greening the spaces and doing what they can to fight climate change. Hotter than fuck down there, right? You need to start having your cities go underground, vertical farming, especially underground, and all that sort of a thing. You need to set up brand new cities to deal with the horrors of the world under climate change, especially in the global south. It is going to be devastating if they do not completely change their infrastructure for the climate changed world of tomorrow. There's going to be death and devastation. Horrible. Shortages come at a critical time for Tunisia, a net importer of wheat that has been hit hard by price hikes since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, both huge exporters. Painful cost of living crisis is compounding woes as the government is in negotiations with IMF for a bailout package. Yeah, and the IMF is a method of economic warfare inflicted by the global north onto the global south. It's another way to exploit them. Yeah, I've all bitched about the IMF over and over again. It's just a horrific thing. World Bank and the IMF are just another way of colonizing the global south. It's just super bad. So basically, the IMF just needs to send trillions of dollars to Africa. No loans. Just here's trillions of dollars. Completely redo your entire national infrastructure to prepare yourself for climate change. That's what needs to be done. Not doing that, it's a disease. Seeds just died. Tunisia, a country of 12 million, where almost every meal involves bread, couscous, or other cereals-based food, needs 3 million tons of wheat and barley a year. Normally, around 2/3 of this comes from overseas, but with Ukraine war showing no sign of abating, that option looks expensive and even impossible. The lack of rain has left reservoirs at historic lows of less than a third capacity nationwide. Biggest located at Sidi Salem, short drive from Chaouchi's farm, is filled with just 60% of capacity. 16%, so 84% of the water is gone. The area has seen less than 10 centimeters or inches of rain since autumn, pushing farmers either to plow withered crops back into the soil or harvest the stalks for animal feed. Kawachi said that in December we sowed wheat here, but the seeds have just died because it's dry. Of the 600 hectares, 1,400 acres he planted, holy fuck, he's got a lot of land. He was able to harvest from just 70. What percentage is that? That's 0.047. No, it's 4.7%. So only 4.7% of his land was able to harvest it. The rest of it was wasted. Last year, Chaouchi managed to grow 1,000 tons of cereals, but this year he believes he won't break even, having spent 600,000 dinars, $198,000 on the seasonal cereal crop. Again, this is why when we're looking at growing food, it needs to be vertical farming, because the weather's too hot and it's too dry. Anything other than shifting to vertical farming, especially in the global south, is a waste of fucking money. And it's just a waste of money and resources. Period. This year's harvest will be catastrophic, warned Enes Karbeche, spokesman for the Farming and Fishing Union UTAP, predicting a fall in output of 2/3 from last year. 2/3. They only have 1/3 of their production last year. They'll only be able to harvest seeds for the next season, and the country will have to import all its needs for domestic consumption of 2 types of wheat and barley, Karbeche said. Yeah, and so because of that, prices are going to go up and people are just going to start starving. And the people in the global north, they're just going to not export it because they're going to need it for their own, and the global south is just starve and die. Why the global north needs trillions of dollars to the global south so they can shift completely shift their entire national infrastructure to housing and buildings and their farming and stuff to prepare for the world under climate change. Otherwise, you're basically saying, yeah, you can just go ahead and die. We have the ability to prevent a lot of the suffering globally, but it's just not going to be done because of no profit in doing the right things or not exploiting or murdering people for fun and profit, right? We have the ability, but we're just not going to do it. Rethink farming. UTEP has called on the government to urgently announce a drought and state of water emergency. It is also demanding a clear strategy to boost Tunisia's water reserves, calling for new desalination plants and quotas for at least some farm irrigation. So here's the issue. So desalination, I keep pronouncing that incorrectly, is good. They're going to need it, but they need to literally it has to shift to vertical farming, because putting water on crops is just going to you're just going to waste almost all of it, because it's just going to dry up and it's just going to evaporate away, just the way it's going to be, because it's so fucking hot down there. It's almost a waste to rely on anything other than vertical farming or farming in a greenhouse or something like that. Protect from that heat. And so if the governments had the money to do so, which they should, especially in Africa, although they have to deal with the fucking IMF and the World Bank, their limitations. But if they don't have that to deal with, then they should be looking at solar, but using solar panels in combination with farming, that sort of thing too. Having solar panels over your crops can reduce the amount of sunlight it gets to control that, so it doesn't dry out so quickly, and then it can also keeps the temperatures down, which can be another way to help you to potentially use environmental methods of collecting water for local irrigation. Arbechi pointed out that farming makes up 12% of the economy, but 2 or 3% of farmers are leaving the sector every year. Yeah, because there's no way they can survive. Tunisia's water woes are reflected across the Maghreb, already one of the world's most vulnerable regions to drought. Only 2 of the past 10 years have seen what experts consider to be enough rainfall. In December, when farmers were sowing their spring cereal crops, temperatures were 3 degrees Celsius above the seasonal average. Water and climate expert Prouda Gaffrey told AFP that climate change meant it's absolutely vital that we rethink how farming works. Yes, 100%. And I've been talking about that. For example, she said, the country should stop using valuable water reserves to grow dates for export. Tunisia devotes 80% of its water supply to irrigating just 8% of its farmland, leaving the remainder to rely on increasingly scarce water. Doesn't make any sense. Drought means there will be no more water for rain-fed agriculture. Well, I don't know. Dates are like trees. That might be a good candidate for like greenhouse. Put just acres and acres of greenhouses over these, or agrovoltaics. That's what it's called. So using solar farms over that to reduce the amount of water lost, right? That sort of thing. Both greenhouses and solar panels over the dates. That can greatly reduce the amount of water used by it. Do that with desalination plants, then they'll be sitting much, much better. But they have to shift to that sort of a thing. Otherwise, they're just wasting the water, wasting the potential. But they need the money to do that. Questions, comments, suggestions before we move on? Anybody? Now we're moving on to the 4-day work week. Make sure people can hear me. Hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hear me now? Yeah, you can. Okay. All right. This was published yesterday from the Salon. New health study strengthens case for a 4-day work week. 4-day work week has the potential to improve employees' health and sleep. A new study finds. Yes, 4-day work week is 100% what we need to do. It's in my policies. And I start with 4-day work week and like a $33 an hour minimum wage. And then as you get older, every decade, you reduce that by a day for full time. So $32 an hour, 32 hours a week for full time. So it's considered working 40 hours, right? And then, but 24 hours once you've reached 30, and 16 hours at 40, and then basically this should be retirement at age 50, at the very least. That's the way my policies look at it. And I'll go and share those here so you can take a look at them in case you get that bored. All right. While most Westerners take it as gospel that full-time work means working a 5-day work week, many labor groups, progressive businesses, and even governments are touting and even testing the viability of a 4-day work week. Indeed, there are many well-studied benefits to only being required to work for 4 days instead of 5, including improved employee mental health without loss in productivity and increased opportunities for personal activity. Yeah, there's lots of studies on this in almost every country, like Iceland, and businesses that has tried it has pretty much universally kept it. Just the productivity goes up, or it doesn't fall, even with the reduction in time, and work-life balance and health and everything, it just goes up. Now, a new study in the International Journal of Behavioral Nutrition and Physical Activity reveals that there is no significant benefit to having more time off from work. Employees are healthier physically as a result of being more likely to be physically active during their days spent not working. The authors extrapolate from this data conclusions about what would happen if 4-day work weeks became common. So, yeah, people are working less, they have better work-life balance, they're less stressed, and they have more energy and more brain power to actually go out and take care of themselves. I mean, that's it is. The study provides empirical evidence that people have healthier lifestyle patterns when they have a short break, such as a 3-day weekend. Explained a study co-author University of South Australia researcher Dr. Carol Maher in a statement. I'm having a lot of reading problems today. This increase in physical activity and sleep is expected to have positive effects on both mental and physical health, contributing to the benefits observed with a 4-day work week. So for me, if I had a 4-day work week, I would start later in the day, and I would try and get done at probably about the normal time. If I get done by 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, start by 9:30, get done by 4 o'clock or something like that, that would be right about perfect. Study also found that a 3-day weekend improves sleep for workers. Even after a short holiday, people's increased sleep remained elevated for 2 weeks, showing that the health benefits of a 3-day break can have lasting effects beyond the holiday itself, Maher. Using information collected from 308 adults in Australia and New Zealand using a fitness tracker, Fitbit Charge 3, researchers found that people were 5% less sedentary for each additional day they took off from work during vacations, which amounts to being 29 minutes less sedentary each day. They similarly engaged in roughly 13% more moderate to vigorous physical activity for every additional day, amounting to 5 minutes more, and slept 4% more each day, amounting to 21 minutes or more. Okay, when people go on holiday, they're changing their everyday responsibilities because they're not locked down to schedule. University of South Australia researcher Dr. Ty Ferguson, co-author of the paper, said in a statement, "In this study, we found that movement patterns changed for the better when on holiday, with increased physical activity and decreased sedentary behavior observed across the board. Because they're partying, being more social. These are not the first studies to reveal that longer weekends might be better for us. In fact, unless one's work environment is both physically and mentally stimulating, research indicates that spending too much time there is generally bad for your health. A February study released by the University of Cambridge found that companies which reduced their work weeks from 5 days to four had employees with 71% less burnout and 39% less stress, while requests for sick days dropped by almost two-thirds. Just as notably, the University of Cambridge study found that there was a 1.4% increase in revenues among companies that had a 4-day work week, meaning that the loss of that fifth day not only didn't hurt productivity, but actually helped it. 4-day work weeks are also good for the environment. Studies have found in a 2013 study for the Center of Economics and Policy Research, a liberal-leaning think tank whose contributors include Nobel Memorial Prize in Economics Science winner Robert Solow and Joseph Stiglitz. It was determined that if the United States adopted a less time-intensive weekly work model, it could, through that alone, take a large bite out of the greenhouse gas emission from climate change. For all practical purposes, some amount of climate change is inevitable, the authors wrote as a caveat, before noting that if major policymakers and business leaders chose a more European response to productivity gains rather than following the model more like that of the United States, this would on its own make a big difference. By itself, a combination of shorter work weeks and additional vacation, which reduced average annual hours by just 0.5% per year, would very likely mitigate 1/4 to 1/2, if not more, of any warming, which is not yet locked in. I don't know about that, but okay. All right. Questions, comments, suggestions on 4-day work week? Something we definitely need to do. This was shared by Gaming Mind on Discord, I think. We're going to go over this. I've read through most of it. Pretty interesting. This is more about accessibility and cognitive disabilities. Happening. Any questions about the 4-day work week before we move on? Comments, suggestions? Healer. You're just really yawning today. I went to bed at a decent hour though, too. I don't know why I'm yawning so much. Specialist turn, I think. I'm not sure what this site is, but moral injury at work and neurodiversity are their additional risk factors. Oh my god. He's from February 2022. So about a year ago. The original understanding of moral injury was developed in the 1990s by a psychiatrist working with military veterans, Jonathan Shea. Moral injury is caused by a threat to one's morality, such as harming an innocent bystander or destroying civilian livelihood, as well as by a failure to prevent harm to others and by observing betrayal by leadership in high-stakes situations. While its causes and manifestations may sometimes overlap with PTSD, moral injury is different in its connection to morality and ethics rather than survival. I think we need to start claiming a lot more of this. Although, what is morality, right? You could say that helping LGBT people causes me moral injury, right? That is problematic, just as a phrase, but and the potential for abuse there by right-wingers. I gotta fix my thing here. Did Velcro. Okay. Study of moral injury was soon adopted in healthcare, teaching, law enforcement, and other workplace contexts where individuals might be charged with providing significant benefits to others but are not always able to deliver such benefits due to structural resources or workload limitations and may in fact cause harm instead. In addition, leadership failures resulting in inferior services and harm to employees also play a role in developing injury. However, most jobs have the potential to inflict harm on individuals. For example, a customer service representative who uses scripts designed to manipulate and psychologically pressure vulnerable customers to pay for unnecessary, overpriced, or potentially harmful products and services can also experience moral distress. Right. No one likes to be in that sort of job where you're on the phone and engaging in high pressure sales, right? That's not, no one enjoys that. But that's what a lot of people end up having to do. Sell insurance, especially Medicare stuff, so whatever. Due to the cumulative nature of stress, these moral stress experiences can add up to a moral injury that may cause an individual to be unable to continue their employment. Ideally, we would just create a world where such unethical methods of doing business wouldn't exist. That's hard. That as long as we have a profit-driven system under capitalism, that's unfortunately never going to be the case, which is why we need to evolve beyond monetary system capitalism. The primary driver is profit. As long as profit exists for benefit for your tribe, however you define that at any given time, then the exploitation and destruction of the environment and others is always going to be there. Recently, I proposed that moral injury across occupations can be defined as a trauma response to witnessing or participating in workplace behaviors that contradict one's moral beliefs in high-stakes situations where potential physical, psychological, social, or economic harm to others. It's important to emphasize that while the experience of distress is subjective, focusing on high-stakes situations and significant harm helps preserve the gravity of the concept and the respects of its military life and death roots. Not all workplace negative emotion is moral injury. When in doubt, it is helpful to apply the significant harm to others test. For example, when a new dental assistant may experience a negative emotion when working with distressed patients, if the assistant is following the standards of proper care and the ultimate aim of the treatment is long-term patient benefit rather than harm, there's no moral injury. However, if the assistant is pressured into using inferior tools and materials and into violating the standards of care, then the patients, upset or not, might indeed be subject to harm in the worker through moral injury, right? Because capitalism, profit, all that stuff. Injurious events are typically seen as falling into three categories: transgressions by others, including managers, co-workers, and clients. For example, the dental practice owner using inferior materials to save the cost, therefore increase profit. Transgressions include individuals committed themselves, the dental assistant participating in inferior care practices. Betrayal, feeling that managers, colleagues, or policymakers have betrayed occupational values, employees, or clients, customers, etc. For example, the dental practice owner might betray professional standards and possibly even attempt to put the blame on the individual employees if there is a complaint. The experience of witnessing and participating in moral transgression may result in a range of intense feelings, such as the generally internalized grief, anxiety, guilt, shame, and disgust, or more often, externalized anger. Key differentiating aspect between moral injury and PTSD is the specific focus on damage to one's sense of morality and trust. Individuals may also develop physical illness or a range of self-harming behaviors. Those who experience workplace moral injury are also likely to disengage at work, quit, or become too physically ill or emotionally ill to working. So, yeah, this kind of feeds into the biopsychosocial model, right? If at work you have to engage in work which results in moral injury, that is a psychological harm, which then may affect your body and physically ill, and then also may lash out at others, much like they're talking about here, right? Or may become socially withdrawn or depressed or all these other things. So, yeah, harm in one place affects all other aspects of your life. So now we're getting into the part moral injury and neurodiversity. Many adult diagnosed neurodivergent individuals report workplace burnout as a catalyst event that made them search for a diagnosis. As one of these individuals, I wonder if, for many of us, moral injury is a better explanation of the experience we might have attributed to burnout or autistic burnout. It certainly was for me. Yeah, I think this is from the standpoint of autism. Is there research evidence that may suggest that autistic and more generally neurodivergent individuals might be at higher risk for developing a workplace injury? At least 2 research supported lines of reasoning suggest that this is the case. Autistic people and a sense of justice. Research indicates that autistic individuals are more likely than allistics. Now, allistics is neurotypical, I think. Come on, good. Oh, what? No. Oh, okay. People who are not on the autism spectrum. Okay. Increasingly popular term to help distinguish people from their autistic peers without using judgmental like normal, in contrast to autistic. I wonder, neurotypical is probably too broad for this. I think it really is specific. Yeah, here we go. Allistic is also referred to as typical. The term refers to all non-autistic people, comprises both neurotypicals and non-autistic. Oh, yeah, okay, that's what I was looking for. Okay, yeah, so it is just people who are not autistic. Okay. Okay, autistic people in the sense of justice. Research indicates that autistic individuals are more likely than allistics to consistently follow moral rules regardless of whether they are acting privately or publicly, even if an immoral action can benefit themselves and experience increased concern about their ill-gotten gains and the moral cost. Although initially misinterpreted from the perspective of the autistic deficit, this experimental study provides evidence that autistic people are highly concerned with doing the right thing and are distressed by violating their moral principles, as demonstrated by their refusal to momentarily benefit themselves by supporting a bad cause, whether in public or in private. Allistics, on the other hand, were more likely to benefit themselves by supporting a bad cause while acting privately. It is logical to suggest that individuals with increased concern over the moral cost of their actions will be more susceptible to injury. Lived experience accounts from a Twitter thread on the topic suggest that the potential of doing harm to others as a part of the job can prevent autistic individuals from taking certain types of jobs in the first place and increase their likelihood of developing a moral injury. So, yeah, pretty much all jobs in one form or another create moral harm, because capitalism in and of itself and the way it treats its workers and the environment is inherently unethical and systemic and structurally violent, right? Cumulative trauma as a sensitization factor. Cumulative psychological trauma exposure is documented much higher in autistic individuals than in general population. Such exposure has the potential to sensitize or make individuals vulnerable to distress in subsequent potentially traumatic situations, although such vulnerability is a probability rather than a certainty in each case. So it's just, yeah, descriptive, not descriptive of potential, but not prescriptive. Repeated trauma exposure is also likely to be experienced by other neurodivergent populations. Moreover, neurodivergent populations with sensory sensitivities also experience regular sensory trauma. childhood and adult bullying, workplace discrimination, and the minority stress overall are likely to create complex mental wellness vulnerabilities. Yep. Additionally, for many neurodivergent individuals, dealing with schools, workplaces, and even social support services adds up to the experience of constant betrayal, the sense of repeated betrayal by institutions, public education, employers who tout neurodiversity hiring programs, yet on close look, seek to exploit a narrow segment of talent or rates of pay. It's often reported in accounts of neurodivergent experience. Cumulatively, these experiences may create a betrayal vigilance in addition to the general physiological vigilance. Further sensitize individuals to So if you're used to being abused, put in shitty situations, you'll be more sensitive to it. What should responsible organizations do? Responsible organizations interested in neurodiversity hiring and providing an inclusive work environment must take preventative measures to minimize the risk of moral injury for all employees by guaranteeing ethical organizational operations. In addition, when working with neurodivergent populations, an extra care must be taken to ensure clear and unambiguous multi-channel communication, transparency, and psychological safety. Multiple channels for asking questions and providing input in person via web forums via third parties to ensure anonymity, and clear organizational responses to any issues are crucial for building and trust. Restorative organizational practices may also include an inventory by neurodivergent employees of all practices that may, intentionally or not, create the potential for moral injury. Examples of such practices are exclusion, infantilization, segregation, under-resourcing, silencing, or otherwise inconvenient treatment of different employee or client populations. Rectifying such practices is essential to rebuilding trust. As an integrated solution, trauma-informed organizational practices, inclusion by design, are likely to support the needs of employees regardless of neurotypes. Yeah, inclusion by design. That's the way to prevent trauma. Educating your people on disability and or diversity and all that sort of stuff, super important. That's kind of one of the things we struggle with in the accessibility discipline, that people don't understand ability. They don't understand the lived experience of people with abilities. They don't understand it. So it's hard for them to have an understanding or even start caring about accessibility because they have no idea how it matters. They have no idea what the lived experience is. So one of the first things to do for accessibility is, and people work with, is start to increase their empathy by increasing their understanding of the lived experience. Abilities. That's something we need to work on where I work at, something that's in the plan, but we haven't quite gotten to yet. But yeah, it's important. And you can do that by inclusive training at your workplace. What can individuals do? Dealing with moral injury depends on specifics of the situation, one's overall health and mental health, and psychological and economic resources. Some individuals might be able to effectively cope by using self-care. Others might need community or professional mental health support. In my case, multiple experiences of workplace moral injury contributed to significant stress over the years. It also resulted in post-traumatic growth. The latter was largely facilitated by interactions with the community, activism, and working to accelerate organizational change to reduce the incidence of injury. I'll address coping, healing, and post-traumatic growth in the context of injury and neurodiversity in the next installment. Okay, so, all right, any questions, comments, or suggestions before we call this a day? We only have about 5 minutes left to the stream. It's been super quiet today. Anything? Anybody? Anything? Going once? Going twice? All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for gifting me with your time. I really do appreciate it. Have a great weekend. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week.